Hello and welcome to Undercommon Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
Look at the size of that whammer.
I'm Ian Woodworth. I'm joined by my co-host James Daly. And today James is very proud of himself.
Again, it's the moments that you pause between my quotes that I register how sideways or how hard they hit your brain. And while it sounds off the wall, I promise you the quote is within context, and we will explain later if you haven't already realized.
Yeah, so this week we're going to be starting we've talked a little bit about this sort of meta topic in the past, but we're going to start doing a few episodes where we're talking about specific genres and genre conventions and how to incorporate certain conventions into your game, or if you're wanting to run a game in a particular genre, what sort of elements you want to make sure you're focusing on. And this first episode that we're going to be actually marking this group of episodes with, we're going to be talking about urban fantasy.
And I love urban fantasy. Urban fantasy is great, and urban fantasy, while a genre in its own right, is very adaptable, and it can fit itself basically into almost any other genre as well, which makes it very flexible, which is great. And so for my quote, as much as I love things like Dresden Files, which is a wonderful urban fantasy, probably still my all-time favorite for urban fantasy would be Hellboy.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see you being a Hellboy fan.
Especially with Del Toro. I love Del Toro, and yeah, just Hellboy hits my heart just right.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and kick this off with a bit of a definition, because if we're going to be talking about a genre, we need to understand what the genre is. What are the genre conventions? What are the things that we need to know about what makes urban fantasy urban fantasy? And I want to start this off with a caveat of these are the general rules. You can find a piece of urban fantasy literature or an urban fantasy game or an urban fantasy movie or TV show that completely ignores one or more of these, and it's still urban fantasy.
Yeah, these are pretty fast and loose. For me, I think the hands down definition, I mean, if you look at most fantasy, high fantasy, obviously you've got the metaphysical, and it's always in that medieval or rural or even in the antiquities. It's in that setting. Urban fantasy is the metaphysical, the spiritual, the weird, whatever you want to call it, in everyday, quote, quote, modern life. Now, again, modern can be anything post-industrial revolution on.
Yeah. So coming from my brief stint in the publishing industry, I can't really say that I ever was really and truly a publishing industry professional in a broad sense. I worked for an independent publisher. I edited 2 books. Neither of them made it to print because the publishing company folded before they got published. So yeah, I worked in publishing for a little bit, but the general overarching themes that make a story fall into urban fantasy is it is a setting with prevalent, obvious magic. There is magic involved in urban fantasy. However, magic takes place in secret.
Yes.
The people who do magic are a minority, and they keep magic secret from the greater population because the greater population generally does not interact well with magic.
Right. Either by choice, design, or, I mean, it could be that, if you're just genetically capable of viewing or not seeing. So again, there's a lot of reasons why this would be the case. But yeah, and that's why I go the metaphysical, because you can call it magic, it can be spiritual, it can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be swords and sorcery magic. It could just be the actions of angels and demons or fae or cryptids. But it is that blending of those elements with, like I said, the everyday and the modern. And I think one thing that makes a good urban fantasy good is how seamlessly you can blend the two into each other. So, I mean, is Bigfoot walking down the street just there and you have to have, a special set of x-ray glasses to see Bigfoot walking down the street? Or is Bigfoot just that really tall, kind of heavily built security guard standing outside the door of maybe a corporation? And Bigfoot giving a tip to what modern, culture would be. Maybe he shaved, so he's not shaggy looking. Maybe he just has kind of like a mullet and is just really huge, like just a very large framed person with a giant mullet versus Bigfoot walking down the street. So unless you would know to ask or you would know, you wouldn't necessarily recognize Bigfoot in your everyday life, though he's still there.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this one is very important, at least from a literary standpoint, it typically takes place in the real world, usually in the modern day or near modern.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can absolutely have an urban fantasy setting that is noir 1920s.
Yes.
That actually sounds really cool.
It does.
I don't have any examples of that off the top of my head, at least nothing that I've read, but that is something that I think would work really well. One of the series that I have read is the Garrett P.I. novels by Glenn Cook, the same author who did The Black Company. And Garrett P.I., it is, imagine the Dresden Files, except that the world is magical instead of the detective.
Okay, I like it.
So Garrett in Garrett P.I. is a retired soldier who went into work as a private eye in a very obviously fantasy world. I mean, there's centaurs and there's gnomes and there's fairies and there's all of these other, fantastical creatures just roaming around and doing their things. And he doesn't have any magic himself, but he is existing in this very magical world, and it has a very noir feel to it.
I get that. I was going to say the first 3 books of Dresden Files, he definitely used the film noir as the inspiration for his stories.
Oh, yes.
And so having your detective in Chicago, I mean, obviously it was modern because it was probably easier to write, but yeah, you could make that a 1920s story real easy. So with that said, looking at mechanics types, something like Old Gods of Appalachia screams modern fantasy, or urban fantasy rather.
Yes, yeah, you could, if you're wanting to do sort of that noir feel, yeah, Old Gods of Appalachia would work really well.
Kids on Bike.
Call of Cthulhu works really well for that.
Call of Cthulhu is almost urban fantasy by definition, almost. It would be, because if you look at the story of Call of Cthulhu, and it is set in that 1920s, early 30s. So yeah, I mean, Call of Cthulhu by itself is urban fantasy. It goes more to that existential cosmic horror as well. But as we said at the beginning, urban fantasy can fit itself into a lot of different genres.
Yeah. So another aspect of urban fantasy is, as the urban part of urban fantasy suggests, it generally takes place in a city.
Yeah.
And the character of the city usually plays into the story. The city becomes a character in the story. It's not just window dressing. The fact that they're in a city is important, and the fact that they are in this specific city is important.
Yeah. So strong examples of this, and not necessarily urban fantasy, but Gotham in the Batman comics, or New York in the Spider-Man and a lot of your Marvel comics. The fact that they are there and they're landmarks, and you just have a certain culture and what's the word? I can't grasp at the word I'm looking for, but really you do have a certain culture and ethos that generate around. So another way to view it would be like it's San Francisco, I think in Big Hero 6, where they did a blend of San Francisco and Tokyo, but you definitely have that Western feel. If you were like somewhere in Miami or Houston, you're going to have different, obviously, cultural and regional things. Fallout does a pretty good job of leaning into this theme of stuff as well.
Right. Another literary example that I have for this is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin.
Okay.
Where once a city becomes old enough and matures enough, it becomes its own sentient entity, which manifests in a person.
I like it.
And the whole story is about New York City is trying to be born, and the 5 individuals who represent the 5 boroughs have to come together and find New York and make sure that New York doesn't get basically eaten by the cosmic entities that want to keep the cities from being born. The thing that feeds on prenatal cities,
Okay.
basically.
So, talking about that, another literary example, and it's both literary and film now, but American Gods by Neil Gaiman
Yes.
is a great example of blending the metaphysical, the magical in with everyday life. And again, so something like that, if you've seen American Gods, that would be another great example of urban fantasy.
Yeah. And then I've already touched on this. Practitioners of the magic have to keep it secret from the non-magical general public for whatever reason. And the last one is there's often some element of the supernatural at play. So that would be your fairies or your vampires or your dragons or your cosmic entities and any of those sorts of things. There's usually something that is beyond humanity involved.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. With this too, you can also take this, I mean, and you start blending lines, but if you wanted to take the city we became an example of something, but if you had something like a sentient AI trying to emerge, so maybe this is the way that, the Fae are trying to express themselves now through, cyberspace and technology. So we've talked about different styles that this could blend into. I think an urban fantasy / cyberpunk blend would be extremely interesting because, as Arthur C. Clarke, a technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
That's just Shadowrun.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And so I think that would be
That's all that is if we blend cyberpunk and urban fantasy, you get Shadowrun.
Yeah, you really do. I like it. I've not played a whole lot of Shadowrun, but thinking of what I know of the genres, that would be correct. Yes. Okay, Shadowrun. There you go. Cyberpunk and urban fantasy. We have it.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of different examples of the different ways that you can go with this. You can have a setting where the magic is big and flashy, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons magic, or you can have it where it is small and it is subtle and it is something that encourages certain outcomes that isn't necessarily going to be, I mean, you're not going to be throwing fireballs at people, but you might be able to scry on something, right?
Yeah.
Or you might be able to think in things like the various, charms and talismans where it's, things for protection, or hexes and curses where you impose misfortune on somebody. These sorts of things where it's not flashy magic, but it is functional magic.
Yeah, it's not an in-your-face fireball generally. And again, because as Ian said, for most part, you're trying to keep your magic and your metaphysical kind of quiet. Again, looking at more sci-fi things, I think if you took a Star Wars game and you ran it between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, so that area after, obviously Order 66, where they've quote, quote, wiped out all or most of the Jedi, and when Luke pops up, the Jedi and the Sith were still there, but again, they were trying to keep their Force use very, very quiet and very under the radar. And right there, you could start bordering on an urban fantasy with that type of magic if you kept it very limited and you had to almost like a Vampire the Masquerade, which would be another great urban fantasy. But if you ran your Jedi Order like a Vampire Masquerade, which actually would be kind of a cool campaign to do, I think that story would have a lot of potential.
Yeah, Star Wars is what happens when you blend urban fantasy with space opera.
Yeah.
Because it is a fantasy. It's science fantasy. It's space wizards with laser swords.
Yeah.
I mean,
really,
come
what
on.
else is there?
If you want to boil down the Jedi to something that has as many broad pop culture touchstones, for someone who has never seen a Star Wars film or has no concept of what Star Wars is, calling them space wizards with laser swords is pretty much the best way to do it.
Yeah, I would be so in for that. I'd be like, okay, I'm watching this. I don't care.
Yeah. And so talking about typically taking place in a city, there are several examples of this. As we've talked many times before on this show, the Dresden Files set in Chicago.
Yeah.
There's one from the 80s called War for the Oaks by Emma Bull, which takes place in Minneapolis.
Ooh, okay.
It's on my TBR. I haven't read it. My wife read it last year, and she really enjoyed it. Basically, as I understand it, the city of Minneapolis is expanding, and the fairies are basically fighting back to prevent it from expanding. I
Okay, I like
think
that.
it is a conflict between humans and fairies.
Okay, so you get some of the like the Earth Liberation Front Fae.
I guess.
Okay,
Um,
I like that.
Another example, because you brought up vampire, they made a Vampire the Masquerade TV show called Kindred the Embraced, which took place in San Francisco. And so,
Which was a weird choice because most of Vampire the Masquerade takes place in Seattle. But meh.
yeah,
That show in the 90s was it had potential. I'll leave it at that. It had
there,
potential.
there were choices that were
Choices were made.
made. I am not going to assign value to those choices, but choices were made.
Absolutely, I agree. Trying to think. I know of some, and for the life of me, I can't. Neuromancer. Neuromancer is more cyberpunk. It is the
It is the
foundational
quintessential
essential cyberpunk. Yes.
cyberpunk, yes.
But with this too, the cities they're in, they have a couple cities that are in Southeast Asia, and those cities do play a very strong role. Same with Blade Runner and that point where they're in LA, but again, that urban surrounding, the fact that you're in a densely populated area, the people are poor, plays a huge role. If you've played early Final Fantasy VII, or if you've bought the remake, and I think it's just the first quote quote chapter of the remake, but the city of Midgar, you have that same feeling where you are in a densely populated area. You have the rich are on literally a separate level than everyone else versus the poor that live in slums. Altered Carbon, again, more cyberpunk, but again, the city itself is a character within the story.
Right, yeah, because you have to understand the stratification of the city in order to understand what's going on in the background, what the
Right.
conflict, what the tension in the story is.
And with that too, when you're dealing with an urban setting or an urban fantasy setting, you do kind of want to build that tension between the classes because if you take that back to again a high fantasy setting, you have your lords, you have your vassals, you have your merchants, you have your serfs, and you do have that very strict social stratification. Modern society, we generally don't have those now, but you do have obviously your wealthy, your government, your aristocrat, those living in the slums. So you do have that social stratification. And if you can magnify that for your story, that just kind of helps develop a bit of that tension for your characters.
Right, yeah. And you touched on this a little bit when you were talking about different cities. The city that you pick is going to color the narrative.
Yes.
New York City is a very different city to Chicago, is a very different city to Miami, is a very different city to LA, is a very different city to Las Vegas.
Is very different than Rome, which I mean, you could totally do an urban
Yes.
fantasy in Rome or London as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And is very different from like Waterdeep.
Yeah.
You know, because we have a kind of successful adventure that they designed for 5e for Waterdeep. It's
sort of ish.
all of the feedback that I've heard for Waterdeep Dragon Heist is that it is incredibly linear and it doesn't touch on most of the city, which is a shame. But you have settings within D&D, which are cities, which are huge cities. You know, you have Waterdeep, you have Baldur's Gate, you have Neverwinter. Waterdeep being the largest of these by far. And, you know, you have these urban settings where you have to approach it differently than if you're just adventuring through the wilderness because they are so vastly different.
Yes. And I think, honestly, doing this, we might want to visit in the future, maybe next episode or in a couple episodes, but examining and actually building up or world building a framework for this because again too, what's your population density of the city? How crowded is it? Is it super packed like a slum? Is it more spaced out like suburbia? What's the weather of your city like? Is there any environmental factors? Is there pollution? Is it clear? Is it clean? Is it hot? Is it cold? How are the people? Are they xenophobic or are they accepting? So is everybody just like humans or everybody just dwarves in your city? Like, again, if you went to a mountain hall, you know, where they worship Moradin, everyone's going to be a dwarf. So if you walk in as a bald gnome, they're going to look at you very strangely versus if you walk in as a dwarf. Or if you had a metropolitan city like Baldur's Gate, where you've got everybody mixing in. These are all different kinds of things to account for your characters too. And also how you're going to have whatever supernatural or spiritual or cosmic forces that are going to interact. How are they going to start blending into this background picture of your city? Because the city is the background, and everything that is your magic or your other should run just behind the scenes and just behind the curtains. You should see the curtains wiggle and move, but that's all the quote, quote, average person should ever notice of the fantasy portion of your urban fantasy.
And Jim Butcher does a wonderful job addressing this in the Dresden Files, is that until a non-magical person is literally punched in the face with the certainty of magic existing, the general population will do everything in their power. Their brains will do all sorts of cartwheels to rationalize away anything that they see that was attributed to magic, to rationalize it away because magic doesn't exist.
And some people, even when they are punched in the face with the reality of Jim Butcher's world, still makes a mental choice to choose not to believe it because it is easier for their psyche to handle.
Yes, that is definitely a fairly common approach to take with urban fantasy.
The other thing Jim Butcher does really well too is those with some sort of mystical or supernatural power tends to have a negative effect on a lot of nearby technology. And so if anything's going to be like filmed or video recorded, the quality is generally super degraded. And that kind of explains, again, like the sketchy pictures of Bigfoot or why you can't get a good cell phone picture of a UFO flying through. It's because anything that's outside of that norm tends to alter technology down for whatever reason. And so, yeah, with that, even within Jim's Butchers, he's addressed, hey, people with the cell phone camera running through and doing stuff.
Yeah. So we've got some other examples of different approaches to urban fantasy media. Another one that is on my TBR that sounds very interesting and is something that I've been wanting to read for a while is Jade City by Fonda Lee. The Green Bone Saga, it's a trilogy, and it is an Asian origin sort of urban fantasy rather than a Western European origin, where Jade is the power source for magic.
Ooh, okay.
And the families that are able to use Jade to do magic are basically the nobility.
Okay.
And the base conflict in the first book is that a new drug has hit the market that lets anybody use Jade.
Okay. I am seeing some bleed over from the first Dresden File book, Stormfront. Whether one was inspired by the other or not, I don't know. But that is a trope that kind of pops up, is some sort of chemical alteration that gives people access to the metaphysical, be it a magical trinket that you pick up or, again, some sort of pharmaceutical or something along those lines, or a piece of tech perhaps that gives you access to that, which would be a good way to introduce your otherwise everyman common player character into this world. I think that's another thing to address too. If you are going to run an urban fantasy, why are your players able to interact with the metaphysical?
Right, yeah. And another example, if you're wanting to go from a game side thing, from a D&D perspective, that's warlocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Warlocks are people who don't have magic, who get access to a thing that lets them do magic.
Yes, absolutely. D&D again too, within your Call of Cthulhu's, your Old Gods of Appalachia, again some sort of binding, some sort of infernal contract. Absolutely. You could even run something along those lines with kids on bikes, but with that, again, that could be maybe they stumble upon an artifact of some sort. They pick up the Annabelle doll. And now they're exposed to all kinds of stuff, and they have to figure out either how to live with the world, stop the issue, or possibly just seal it away from themselves so they can live in ignorance once again.
Yeah.
And actually, I think too, if you were running a campaign or even a one shot, I think that's the choice you put in front of your characters, and each character might choose a different path. Do they try to seal it away? Do they join it? Or do they just try to separate themselves from it so they can ignore it? I think those are three really strong possibilities you could run within your story or campaign.
Yeah, and that would be an interesting way to integrate inter-character tension,
Yeah.
to have people who are coming together because they all want to get to the thing or they all want to deal with the thing, but they have their own motives, they have their own desired outcomes. And so while they are an alliance of convenience as a party, their ultimate goals are diametrically opposed to one another.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a handful of games that are built like that. That is one of the reasons why I really want to play the Alien RPG still, is each character is given their own secret goal that they have to make progress on for that character to level. And so again, yes, you are working in the Confederation for the time, but your own personal goals are paramount, or they should be. I think Paranoia was like that too, was it not?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just about to bring that up because you have your primary quest, which the computer is giving you that you have to go through, but every character is also a member of a secret organization. And that secret organization is also going to give you an objective. And you have to figure out how to complete your objective for your secret society while also completing your objective for the computer while not revealing that you're a member of a secret society because that's not allowed and you'll get executed if you're found out. And then on top of that, everybody has a mutation, but you're not supposed to have mutations. Mutations aren't supposed to exist. And if you reveal your mutation, that is grounds for being executed. So there's a lot of contrivance going on whenever you're playing Paranoia to sort of balance all of
Muddle
that
through.
stuff out.
Yeah. That said, you absolutely, absolutely, absolutely need to reach Dungeon Crawl Carl and
It's
then come back and consider Paranoia with the AI of Dungeon Crawler Carl. Oh my God, that would be amazing.
yeah. Yeah, we've got it. They were running a flash sale on Audible
Okay.
a few weeks ago, and my wife was able to get it for 80% off all
Oh,
of the
nice.
books.
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to grab it for Kim. I didn't, but I've got her. She's on the
Oh,
second book currently.
yeah, and it included the pre-order for the new one that's coming out
Oh,
later
nice.
this year.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so excited.
So it's in our Audible library.
It's in the hopper.
I just need to get around to starting it.
Do it now.
I'm trying to record an episode now,
Oh,
James.
okay. Fine. Nah, fine.
Anyway, some other examples. Some of the books that I have read over the years that would fall into this. It was one that I supported on Kickstarter, was The North Valley Grimoire by Blake Northcott.
Okay.
It is urban fantasy, but it is a magitech magic.
Ooh.
So magic exists. You can do magic the old-fashioned way, but the government is now they have a secret division that is making magical technology.
Okay. Again, that feels very much, again, as I said, I love Hellboy, and the movies by Del Toro are amazing. I did not watch the modern one because I heard it wasn't that good. The comics that the Del Toro movies are based off of, though, are good. And it kind of runs along that line that you have your secret government agency that's kind of handling everything that goes bump in the night, but they bump back is how they state things.
Right. And Blake Northcott she is in the comic book industry. She does stuff with, I think, Dark Horse comics.
Ooh, I love Dark
She's done
Horse.
it.
Yes.
She's written a few. I'm going to have to look this up now because I can't remember. I think she designed some covers for Heavy Metal magazine.
Ooh, nice.
She was writing some Barbarella stuff and some Vampirella stuff recently. But yeah, she's done some work for DC. She's done some work for Dark Horse. But
now, her novels, were they just regular novels or were they graphic novels?
This one in particular is a regular novel.
Okay.
I haven't read any of her other stuff yet, but...
Gotcha. Speaking of Dark Horse, though, Spawn. Spawn kind of borders right between urban fantasy and outright horror. Spawn himself is not necessarily shy or covert about his use of magic and force, but by and large, the people and the city around him doesn't know it exists. And so they are going about their everyday life with that. Another good example that kind of hits that borderline really close would be something, and I've not seen too much of it, but Supernatural. supernatural kind, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer even too. You have that mirror, and that's right on the edge of either one.
Right, yeah, and I actually have those on my list
Oh
as
yes.
yeah, as TV shows that would fall into that more the supernatural heavy
Yeah.
urban fantasy, but it still would fall into the category of urban fantasy.
Yeah.
One that it's sort of a I don't know if it would be considered a YA or I think it's more of a crossover, so that new adult or whatever, they keep changing the name of it. They can't decide what it is. It's that a little more mature than YA, but not quite a full like adult novel.
Okay.
So this is one that I picked up just because I found the title and I thought it was hilarious. The utterly uninteresting and unadventurous tales of Fred the Vampire Accountant.
I love it.
It was fun. The cast of characters ended up getting a bit bloated, and it ended up being one of those sort of super friends kind of deals. So the further you get in the series, the less I liked it because the more powerful friends he had to call on. And it just ended up becoming kind of Mary Sue-ish in feeling. But the first book is great because he is this very boring accountant and he gets turned into a vampire. He's given no guidance on how to be a vampire. He's just sort of abandoned. And so he is this vampire he's learned how to do it. He copes with like getting, blood bags from the blood bank sort of deal. He doesn't actually feed off of actual people, directly off of people, because he's not a good vampire. But he sort of figured all of this out. And the first book is him going to his 10-year high school reunion.
Oh, okay.
And it works. It works so well.
I'm going to have to check this one out. That definitely sounds fun. Now, talking about this, forgive me. In my misspent youth, I was raised to be very, very zealous. But in the 90s, I'm sure most of us have heard of the Left Behind books.
Yes.
I
never read any of them, but I am familiar with them.
Oh, I read most of the series. I don't think I read the last 2 or 3. But the authors of the Left Behind books earlier in the 90s, and I'm like 91 to 94, wrote a series of books called This Present Darkness. And it was about the quote-quote spiritual warfare between angels and demons. And again, it was from a very evangelical Christian perspective. But with that, it does fit urban fantasy because the people were tempted and cajoled and influenced by the demons to take specific actions that could be simple or wide-ranging. And then obviously the main characters had their flight of angels protecting and fighting them. So you do see the people living their everyday lives while the angels and demons are having this eternal conflict and war around them within the spiritual realm that the people never get to actually see. It's just whoever wins or loses whatever moment or battle at that point would affect what happens to the main characters' lives and surroundings around them.
Okay.
But so, I mean, with that type of urban fantasy, and again, that is where the spiritual or the supernatural is running just behind the curtain, but still affecting everyone around them.
Yeah. Another one that I read recently that was an amazingly written book. One that I have to put a caveat and a content warning on because there is a lot of gore.
Okay.
In this particular book.
What's the 2 pints of blood amongst friends?
Well, primarily because the main character becomes a forensic cleaner. So somebody who comes in and cleans up crime scenes.
Oh my. Oh my.
Yeah. And some of the stuff gets really graphic.
Okay.
And those sorts of things don't bother me, but I recommended this book to my wife. And she told me after she got done with it that there were times when she had to stop reading it because she was on her lunch break.
I never would have imagined that body horror would get to Kate.
Well, it's the nature of the body horror.
Okay, fine. Just the description and the graphicness of it. Okay.
And the fact that she was trying to eat lunch at the same time. And
fair. What's a little meatloaf amongst friends when you're talking about disemboweled organs, right?
but the book is Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang by Kylie Lee Baker. It starts off in the middle of the COVID crisis. and like in the middle of lockdown, and she doesn't pull any punches from the beginning.
I like it. I'm actually here while we're doing this. I'm going to take a moment and probably not now, but I think probably pretty close to after this if I don't, ADHD scroll brain. I think putting a reading list on our general tab within our Discord, because we do consume a lot of media. And I think some of these, especially for inspiration or just for good stories, would be a great thing to put up for our listeners and say, hey, here's a reading list of things that we suggest that tie in to whatever our current topic may or may not be.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a pretty good idea. I can probably manage that.
Okay.
Yeah, and
yay, new ideas. The muse has struck again.
Yeah.
Chaos Wheel. Roll for chaos.
Notice that James said, we should do this, and not, I'm going to do this.
Well, I was getting ready to, and I'm thinking it means like, I'm going to do it. I'm like, 1, 2, 3, not it. I have ideas. That's my job. My job is ideas.
Yep. We have established that your job is the ideas and my job is the execution. But yeah, so, and a lot of the other books and shows and stuff that are on my list are stuff that we have already talked about. I think the only other one really that is on my list that we haven't mentioned yet are the Basilog books. So starting with Perdido Street Station by China Mayville.
Okay.
That's another one that is on my TBR. My brother-in-law really likes China Mayville stuff, but from everything that I have heard about it, it's weird. It's like,
okay.
It's really weird.
I can handle some weird. It just depends on how far weird goes.
But like the magic involved in Perdido Street Station is thaumaturgy.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of it's just an unusual approach to magic. It's an atypical magic.
I like it.
And from what I understand, there's lots of rules around it, and the rules aren't always intuitive.
Magic should be a little confusing.
I agree.
Especially in an urban fantasy, because if it was easy to access, everyone would have it. So again, that bit of confusing or muddiness to confound what magic is and does, I think does fit a lot of urban fantasy settings.
Yeah. And I also like urban fantasy where, yes, the magic exists. Yes, the magic is powerful. We don't use it because it is no longer practical for us to use it in our modern world.
I like that too, yes. Or it's unreliable, or we have better methods, yeah.
Yeah, or it's like if you were to pull Dungeons & Dragons into our modern world, and you have a cleric. And the cleric has cure disease, they have cure wounds, they have, all of these other lesser restoration, they have all of these spells to heal people. The issue is that unless you have an incredibly high level cleric, and even then, there is a very finite number of people that they can help in a day.
Right. Yeah, if you had a cleric and you have, maybe they're level 2 or 3, you've got heal minor wounds, that's like 1d4, 2d4. You might fix a scratch, you might fix a broken bone at absolute most, and you're done. You can't do anything else until you take, quote, quote, a long rest. So you're done you can help one person.
Yeah. I mean, a first level cleric, I think, has 2 first level spell slots.
Yeah.
And so you can cast cure wounds twice in a day. And given that most characters within a setting that even get PC levels don't advance beyond, say, level 3.
Yeah.
That's not a whole lot. And so you would have to be at least level 3 in order to cast Lesser Restoration, because it's a second level spell, I think. I think it's second level. But so you can cure one person of poison or disease, or you can give 50 people a shot of penicillin.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, so even if you look at like D&D weapon damage on a whole, again, so the cleric can heal a 1d4. And that's what, getting punched in the face or getting stabbed or cut by a dagger, a slashing cut from... You can cut yourself in the kitchen.
Cure wounds is a D8.
Is it a D8? Okay.
Cure wounds is a D8. Healing word is a D4.
Okay, gotcha. But I'm thinking you can cut yourself in the kitchen cooking, and the damage with that kitchen knife's a 1d4. You can kill one person who cut their finger while cooking dinner, and you're done for the day.
You can heal one person.
Heal, yeah.
You said kill.
Oh, well, I mean, depending
Freudian
on the
slip, yes. Yeah, depending on the cleric. Yeah. And, if you look at the various arcane spells on the wizard spell list, most of them are not useful in a mundane setting.
Yeah.
Just about anything evocation is completely useless outside of like military applications.
Right.
It just
Your gun's going to be a better cast of magic missile than magic missile would be.
yes, and I can fire 300 missiles out of my gun without any issues, as opposed to a first level wizard being able to shoot what, four,
Yeah.
eight missiles total.
No, it's like if you use
Because
both
it's
spells, yeah.
yeah, if you use both spell slots.
Yeah. I used actual missile.
Yes. And so that's one of the things that you need to consider is that technology is the great equalizer.
Absolutely.
Technology is the reason why the mundanes don't need magic.
So I'm going to throw this out here and then I'm going to ask you for something after this, but I think a good setting would be to do a post-apocalyptic setting. Technology, for whatever reason, EMP, war, the power grid went down. Technology has failed and magic is starting to seep back in. So people that may have innately had the ability to cast magic missile and not fully understand. So now, again, that canceling force of technology has been eliminated and the magic and the metaphysical has started to seep back in. And
so you're describing Shadowrun again.
Again, it happens. But what I'm going to say here is I think here we've discussed the parameters for urban fiction fairly well. And I think if we come back with our next episode and we start world building an urban fantasy setting for and with our listeners, I think we are at a good bridge point if we wish to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think we have established pretty well what urban fantasy is.
Yeah.
We've provided some examples. We have talked about the different elements. I feel like we have really, really hit on a lot of them.
Yeah. So next time we come back, I think we're going to sit down. We're going to flesh out the hows and whys of our magic and our metaphysical, and maybe start building up our location as well. Because as we said, your location, your surroundings, and your settings is as much of a character as the metaphysical. If not, they're as much of a character as any of the NPCs, absolutely. And maybe even as much of a character as the PCs themselves.
Right. Yeah. I don't have anything.
Yeah. No, I mean, at that, yeah. So I think
just a general agreement there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. That's a pretty good place to wrap up. So this episode is going to be a little bit shorter than our typical episodes, but that's okay. We've
left ourselves a good segue. Now we could push that extra 10 minutes, but I think that would kind of flub into if we wanted to do a second episode, I think we'd wind up stepping on our own tail.
Yeah. So I'll come up with some ideas. Do you want me to come up with a random table so that we can...
Yeah, we can definitely do some random tables.
Roll some random table stuff?
Yeah, roll some random tables. And like I said, kind of like our old friends World Build With Us kind of did, sit down and we haven't done some good old-fashioned world building in a little while. And I think that might be one thing for us to do.
Yeah, I think it's been, how many episodes? It's been well over 50 episodes since the last time we touched Verdigris.
Yeah.
So I would have to go back and look and see when our last Verdigris episode was. That was the last real major
world
building episode that we did. So yeah.
I think we were looking at Isla Fera at one point because we were going to build off of Verdigris and kind of expand our region. But
yes. Yeah, we were going to be talking about Isla Fera. I don't know that Isla Fera would be a good candidate for this particular episode. I think we need something.
I don't think so.
We need something outside of my D&D homebrew world.
Yeah.
In order to really drive home how this works.
Oh no, we get to build from the ground. I love it. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm heartbroken. Oh noes.
Don't throw me in the briar patch, Brer Bear. Anyway, so thank you everyone for listening today. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, or if you have anything that you would like to see added to this urban fantasy setting that we're going to be making next episode, send us an email under commontaste@gmail.com or come join us on our Discord, and you can tell us directly through our Discord. You can find a link to the Discord from our website under commontaste.com. You can also find links there to our itch store, undercommentaste.itch.io, and the Patreon that I still haven't canceled yet.
Still lingers
Patreon.com.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. Patreon.com/undercommentaste. I need to migrate all of the documents and stuff off of it before I close it, just to
Yeah,
make sure that I keep access to everything.
yeah, the spoon count is low right now. It's springtime. We've got a lot of things kind of happening all at once, and it's
Yeah.
just the time of the year.
I am a small business owner who is trying to small business, and it's hard.
Fair. If this is your first time listening, we're very happy you found us. You can find our other episodes. Just search Under Common Taste on your podcatcher of choice, or feel free to join us next week as we start our world build and start a whole new adventure with us as we start from the ground up.
Stay safe, everyone, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Happy gaming.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Under Common Taste. Our theme song is Massacre Anne, written and performed by Mary Kroll and used with permission. You can find Mary online at marykroll.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Kroll. Our logo is by David Sutherland. You can find more of David's work on deviantart.com/David Sutherland or on instagram.com/Willex_73. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so stay safe and we'll see you then.